Prashant doesn't need any much introduction in the Chennai, but nevertheless, we need to do it as form of a protocol. Prashant is a partner in risk advisory in Deloitte, India. He has more than 23 years of experience in the field of governance, internal audit, and risk management. He has experience in performing internal audits and control assessment. And this is all his official profile people would know. Since I am very privileged to introduce him today, he's also an excellent speaker. Excellent singer. I don't know how many of you have heard him singing, but amazing voice, amazing singing. That's what I would like to add on as his profile. Over to you, Prashant. People don't give a big clap, cheer back.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm audible, clear, loud. Okay. Post-lunch sessions and mic. Post-lunch sessions are always. Mic is good. No, I don't have mic. We have 1 hour. Okay? Yeah. We can keep the enterprise trust for 15 minutes and balance 45 minutes we can play Antakshari. That is okay for all of you, right? Okay?
Last 5 minutes.
That will show the trust you have on this topic. Right? If you do 15 minutes of speaking and 45 minutes of Antakshari, that is the trust you have. So thank you, IIA Madras chapter for giving me this opportunity. First of all, happy Mahashivratri to all of you, and happy International Women's Day to all the lovely women sitting here. Right? I was thinking, everybody have said Happy Women's Day. I want to say something more.
Is it? Huh? Yeah.
Sure.
Hello.
Okay. Each of you play different roles in grounding people like us, whether as friends, mothers, sisters, spouses. Thank you all for everything that you do. I think they deserve a big round of applause from all of us. So when Mr. Manian reached out to me and said the theme of the conference is new wave audit and digital audit and all of that, I told him, I requested him actually, there is enough being spoken about AI, Gen AI, analytics, automation, tools, everything, right? We have been hearing it, I have been speaking about it for the last 2 years. All of you would have heard about it for the last 2, 3, 4 years, right? So I requested him, can we look at something different, right? Can we look at a topic that is emerging as we speak, right, globally, and that is probably in a very nascent stage in India, right, for corporates, and that is enterprise trust. Trust is the bedrock of every relationship, whether it be human to human, whether it be business to business, whether it be B2E. Trust is the bedrock. Do we all agree? It's post-lunch. I also need some energy from all of you to kind of keep awake and speak. So feel free to chime in, contribute, critique, share your point of view so we can make it a little bit more interactive, right? So I requested him, can we look at this topic, right? He said, I have to go back to the technical committee and I'll come back to you in next 2 days. I said, okay, coach, we are going back to AI, we are going back to tools. He called me back in 30 minutes and said, we want to have this topic. We want to hear what is happening in this space. So thank you. Thank you to the BOG for having accepted this topic. Many of you heard Santosh Shetty, my colleague partner, speak this morning. And he did allude to the fact that we are going to have a session on enterprise trust this afternoon. We strongly believe that trust, let's first kind of try to unravel this concept of trust, right? How many of you believe that trust is measurable? Can trust be measured? Show of hands. Can trust be measured? It can be measured. Super. So out of 50 people sitting here, 3 of them believe trust can be measured, right? Till this point in time, right, trust is very abstract, right? Intangible, right? It is a very emotional connect that one would attribute to individuals, humans, right? But what we did globally is that, organizations need to have the ability to measure the trust equity, right? Which is having to say, what is the trust quotient of an organization? Now, we went and we did a global survey. I'll talk about some of the results that kind of emanated from that survey. Interestingly, many of the leaders, whether it be at the board level, at the audit committee level, or even at the CEO level, they all felt trust is important in many aspects, right? Whether it be to build a happy workforce, right? A happy workforce that trusts their employers will be more motivated, productivity will increase. They also say trust is going to build significant brand loyalty, right? Customers will come back, there will be a stickiness, right? It is going to have an impact on my shareholders, attracting new investments. It is going to have an impact on my vendor ecosystem. It was all positiveness. So everybody said trust is important, right? But they did not know how to measure this intangible. Okay, trust. So now what? How do we measure it? How do we quantify it? Why should we quantify it? And once we quantify, what do we do with it? I mean, there was a lot of questions around this, right? And the theory is it was thus far only spoken about and felt from a human to human interaction. It was never elevated to a level of enterprise trust. I'll give you a simple example. Let's talk about whether you want to buy a car, or whether you want to travel by a particular airline, or whether you want to go on a vacation and you want to choose a particular hotel to stay in, right? Very subconsciously, we all have a preference based on our experience to select the choice of our liking, right? And that is because you had either a good experience or a bad experience of not choosing one, right? You felt that particular organization was doing everything possible to make each of our lives simple, easy, and enjoyable. These are all very subconscious biases that we had in a particular choice that we make, right? If you go and buy a simple biscuit in a nearby shop, right, there are some subconscious biases. First of all, it is manufactured in a hygienic environment, right? The ingredients are healthy, unadulterated. The pricing is fair, or even a little bit more because of all the factors that we discussed. And we tend to lean on buying that. So there is a bias that is there that is attracting a particular customer, whether it be B2E or a B2B, to lean towards a particular organization. And when we started having these conversations at the board level and with the MDs and CEOs and leadership, they said we need to start looking at aspects of how trust can be measured, right? And that is the background of this. It started about maybe 3-4 years back globally. It is gaining significant traction across sectors. Okay, and I'll speak about some of it. In India, it is very, very nascent. It is probably less than a year or maybe less than 2 quarters that these topics have started gaining propensity. Now, this is a white space. And this is what I personally believe the best space for our fraternity to make the headway, right? I truly believe we have lost the AI battle, okay? I mean, we can discuss till cows come home, right? We will do AI, we will do Gen AI. I was talking to somebody over lunch. We kind of surveyed 1,000 CEOs globally, and from a business perspective, operations perspective, according to the CEOs whom we interviewed, 81% of them said AI and Gen AI is BAU, which is having to say business as usual. It is table stake for business. And we as a fraternity are still talking about where we can implement AI and what we can do with Gen AI, right? So that is a battle that we'll have to mount. But this is a space where we can draw what we want and we can lead organizations. We can lead the path, right? We can be the torchbearers as long as we are able to help appreciate the leadership that this is something that needs to be done in true intent for the organization's benefit. I'll pause here. I'll pause here to take any initial thoughts. Just what is running in your mind. What do you think? And then we'll move ahead. Let's just have a conversation. Because I'm also learning, okay? This is a new concept, as I said, as in 6 months, so we'll all learn together. But let me kind of hear some thoughts. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think we've always been quantifying trust across various spaces. Example, your CIBIL scores. To put it, you're just assessing the credibility and trust, and your credit rating for the companies. So I think we've always been doing it in parts, but this, I don't know, are you talking about the enterprise as like a corporate branding, or what do you mean by enterprise trust?
Okay, so so I have some colleagues who are here from certain auto OEMs. So let me take that as an example, right? If I am an auto OEM, right, and I need to understand whether my brand is trusted, right? What does that mean? First of all, what does that mean? That means what is the reliance? Now you are a customer, right? And let us assume that Sahana is my supplier. Does Sahana trust me as an organization? Now, in her perspective, what is trust, right? Do they deal with me fairly? Are they do they empathize with me? Are they being fair to me, right?
Will they pay on time?
Yeah, will they pay on time is elementary, basic, right? Are they good on transparency, right? Do they have good governance? Do they have good leadership? Are they resilient? So on and so forth. You as a customer will come back and say, trust to me is quality, right? Was I happy with my earlier experience of another OEM? Was my friend happy with my OEM? Will you risk coming to me, right? How do I treat you from my service levels? How do I hear you? How do I react to you, right? That is going to help me as an OEM position myself better and identify, am I good in certain aspects of trust? And we'll come to which are the aspects. Am I deficit in certain aspects? If there is a deficit, do I need to work on those deficits so that I can pull in everybody in this room who's probably going to compete and ask them to lean towards my brand? That is what we are talking about, right? Now if I can't take names, so if I were to simplify a little bit more, right? I am traveling from Chennai to Bangalore in a flight. My first preference, on time. Whichever flight is there, on time I will go. So there could be a couple of airlines which are trusted to be online and on time. Intuitively I will go, right? I may pay a few thousand more, a few hundred more, but I can be 90% sure it will take off on time. It's a trust, right? And that is probably why that particular airline has a significant market share, correct? In the early 80s, when we had one of the largest OEMs in manufacturing passenger car segments come in, there was a significant trust element to it. And that was driven by the price point. the attractiveness of moving people from a two-wheeler to a four-wheeler, right? There was another brand that probably came in the mid 2000, first decade of 2000. They probably did not do that well because the positioning was not that right. Right? So trust is from different lenses, have different attributes, right? Any other thoughts? Yeah, please.
Is it different from goodwill?
Yeah, is it different from goodwill? Yeah, one aspect of trust is goodwill, right? Goodwill is two aspects. Right? One is a gesture of goodwill, right? The other is more from an accounting valuation perspective for a commercial transaction, right? So it is one of the tenets of trust, but it is not only goodwill. It is much larger than that. Sorry, somebody had.
Yeah, so how it is different from the branding?
Yeah, we'll come to it. But again, all these are aspects that are building trust, right? Brand, experience, innovation, right? Transparency, right? If you feel, I'll give you an example, right? If you feel that a particular brand is not being transparent with you in terms of communication, now whether it be in terms of financial reporting, whether it be in terms of press releases, whether it be in terms of, there was a huge brand that was under stress about 2.5 years back, right? And the brand valuation just dropped overnight. And there was complete silence from that brand for 2 weeks. There was no representation from the brand for 2 weeks. There was no transparency in terms of what they did with it, right? Until a point in time when they had to come out in public and speak about it, right? So it is about the transparency also. And that has impact on the brand. The brand is one of the tenets of trust.
I have a thought. I mean,
Please.
it's relatively new to me.
Yeah.
So,
To me also.
okay, right. I think there are two broad components which drives enterprise trust.
Yeah.
One could be the quality of the service or the product, and the second would be the manner or the way in which the people who handle the product. That's what comes to mind. One is the product or services, and the second, the people who are behind or interact with the customer. That's what, which could be drivers for enterprise.
Absolutely, right? I mean, everybody are talking various aspects of trust, and there's no single right answer because it is a concept, right? It's a concept. Every organization can have different ways of how trust needs to be measured, right? Different frameworks of how trust needs to be measured. The point I'm trying to drive is, first is an appreciation that this particular aspect of enterprise trust needs to be measured. I think if that's the first hurdle that needs to be crossed. And I think we have a role to play here, right? And that's when I said, this is a canvas for us to draw, right? As internal audit professionals, there is no chief trust officer. Have you heard chief trust officer?
I think soon it will come after.
Exactly. Out of the organizations that we conducted survey, I may be wrong off my number, but I don't like to use slides, okay? I'm just speaking so that it can be more interactive. I think just about 12 to 15% of the organizations have a chief trust officer, right? Globally. Now in India, we are having conversations with some organizations, and the question comes up is, who can be the chief trust officer? Should it be a full-time job? Can a CFO wear that hat? Can a head of marketing wear that hat? Can head of technology wear that hat? Head of risk, head of audit, right? And our view is, and my personal view also is, it has to be somebody independent, right? I cannot have a marketing guy who insists a trust of a consumer. I will be always in excess trust, right? There has to be somebody independent. And that is where we believe that we as internal audit professionals and risk professionals are very well suited to be in the position of chief trust officer, right? Now, let me just move a bit of it. So we said, how does this whole trust thing help, right? There are four aspects of how this helps, we believe, and this kind of overarches everything that we discussed right now. One is obviously it protects the brand, right? And as one would imagine, what we have called out here is the negative component of it. If not properly addressed, there is a negative impact on the brand by nearly 3/4, up to 3/4, right? Of the score that is there. So it has a negative impact if the trust is not well addressed. Right? We are also seeing that when there is a positive trust behavior that is there, there is a higher retention of your customer, right? That obviously results in a better financial performance, right? And we have seen that S&P 500, the companies with high trust score have outperformed by others by nearly a quarters. We have also seen happy employees, motivated, happy employees, right? Who kind of feel motivated and enhance productivity in an organization that they trust in and they work for. Do you kind of resonate with what I'm saying? Do you agree? Do you have any view? Again, as I said, let's keep it interactive. Let's keep it, if you have a view, please do share. Now, once we did this, we said, okay, now, trust being abstract, how do we kind of monitor this? So we said trust probably has two large buckets, right? One is the capability of an organization. The other is an intent of an organization, right? Capability and intent. What does capability mean?
Competence.
Did you see my slide earlier? Capability means competence and reliability, right? There is competence and I rely on that competence because of my past experience with that particular organization. So there is a capability. So I'll give you a personal example. I was going through some tough time in my professional career. Somebody walked up to me and said, "Do you want to talk to me?" Right? I said, "Yeah, I would love to kind of share, hear from you on how I should handle this particular situation." So that gentleman's first question was, "Do you believe I am the right person who can give you advice?" Right? I don't want to impose anything. Do you believe that I am the right person? Which means, do you think I am competent to kind of give you my view? If that barrier is crossed, then we will talk. That's the first one, capability. Right? Then is the intent. One, I can have a capability, but do I have my heart in the right place? Do I have the heart in the right place? Am I being transparent? Right? Things will go wrong. Right? We are not in the world of nirvana. Things will go wrong. Things will happen. Do we have the courage as organizations to say, yes, there was a slip, we are addressing it. You're being transparent. You're being proactive about how to address certain situations. Right? So I'm just breaking down that intent into transparency and humanity. Right? Do I empathize? Classic case, I'll give you MSME. Right? MSME vendors. Everybody we speak about 45 days maximum limit, whatever is that regulation. And there's some penalty that needs to be paid, we will pay it and it is okay. The intent of the act is not penalty, right? The intent, the heart of the act, we do not want to squeeze small organizations. The intent is not to squeeze and pay penalty. Right? I think when we look at that aspect of humanity, right? And when organizations are able to look at it from that lens, there comes the humanity of organizations. Invariably, when we find, each of you would have found issues around MSME delayed payments and all of that, right? We pay a penalty in the quarterly return. We kind of, say that there has been a delay. Annual return, we say, okay, fine. We will continue to do it. No. It is how you as a larger Samratin, larger corporate, larger good Samratin, want to deal with people and encourage the ecosystem and not talk about financials. That is the humanity. So we said there are two facets, as he said. Capability, competence and intent. And then we said, capability and reliability is the fact of competence, and humanity and transparency comes into intent. Then we said, okay, this is still at a fairly large level. How do we further break it down? Because the intent is to kind of understand where is my trust quotient in the organization, right? So we said we'll have 5 pillars. 5 pillars that are measurable, right? These, if I were to look at a pyramid, it is bottom up, right? So these are the 5 pillars of lead. I'm not going to read it. You can kind of see it there, but I'll walk you through genesis of it. The 5 of them kind of roll up into the 4 and ultimately to the 2. That is how the structure of how the framework would be. And the measurement of trust happens at each of those levels. Let me take an example. You're seeing 18 domains, right? What we heard from the participants of the survey is, out of these 18, there are 3 of them that they have placed it with significant importance, right? One is, how do I get served? Number 1. My experience as a vendor, as a regulator, as a customer, as an employee. How do I get served by the organization? Customer experience was number 1. Number 2 was innovation. Is it an organization that relies on innovation, right? That makes transformational changes, right? Or is it an organization that is a lagger? That was another huge bias towards how trust was seen by people whom we kind of surveyed. And the last one, and interestingly, for me, at least reading the survey, was data, right? Data. How are organizations using data? That was the third most, right? They didn't speak of cost, they didn't speak of price, they didn't speak of leadership, they didn't speak of transparency, they didn't speak of resilience. All of them were there, but the top 3 were these, right? When I give a certain data, how are organizations using it? Are they monetizing it? Are they using it for purposes other than that was intended to? So these 3 kind of very clearly came out as the top 3 among these, right? Now the way to assess trust is at each of this level. And there are multiple ways in which the assessment or the scoring can happen, right? What are the ways in which each of us believe that trust can be assessed? Can I have some inputs? How will you assess?
Track records, past track records.
Okay, past track records of performance. Let's take examples. Okay, sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. Please.
Honoring the commitments.
Okay.
Maybe for taking product or service quality as an example, we could take customer complaints or similar stuff. How many complaints have we got in the past? Maybe we can
Perfect.
measure of it.
Perfect.
Very
Okay.
importantly, the result mechanism of that company.
Perfect.
How is,
Okay.
Getting renewal PO.
Sorry.
Getting renewal PO from customers.
Okay. Renewal POs. Okay. Stickiness. How do the customers come back? Okay.
Fines or penalties through complaints.
Okay. Okay.
Quality service and getting the feedback.
Feedback. Correct.
Customer behavior.
Customer behavior. Customer coming back, stickiness, do customers refer people, all that together in the behavior kind of umbrella. Yes, sir.
The response to events.
Response to events. Yes, the real mechanism, response to events. Okay.
Process of communication.
Process of communication. Very good. Okay.
Employee engagement. with
Employee
workforce.
engagement. You are making my life very easy. Okay.
even the leadership will also be considered.
Okay. Okay.
Transparency.
Transparency. Yes. Communication. Transparency.
Tone at the top.
Tone at the top.
Growth goals, it is achieving.
Growth goals, if it is achieving, okay. All of this and many more. So if I were to just bucket it, one is all the internal assessment, right? Internal assessment. The next is the external assessment, right? So I go and run a survey on sharp questions around these with, let's say employees at a certain level and above, or employees at a certain geography, depending on where you want to kind of actually assess the score. Then you expand it to the ecosystem, right? External world. One would also do a lot of risk sensing in this, right? Which is having to say, let us say a new regulation is coming up in a particular geography. New competition is coming up. Is this organization aware of it? Is the organization prepared for it, right? Do we even know that such a regulation is coming? Do we know that a particular competition is coming? Do we know our market share is reducing? How are we reacting to it? From a risk sensing perspective, right? So external questionnaires, internal questionnaires, risk sensing. So these are components, and all of that you said, right, are kind of going to build the trust score for an organization. Now, before that, this is the rollout part. Before that, one has to establish the framework, right? Important aspect is to develop the framework. And as I said, one could leverage of this to build the framework, right? Now, you build a particular model, right? Everybody would have done ERM, right? Enterprise risk management, or even an internal audit report. One would have a framework of rating something high, medium, low, whether it be a financial impact, reputational impact, goodwill impact, compliance, whatever are the 4-5 parameters that one would consider. And high, medium, and low would have thresholds. As it reaches from one level to another, it moves from low to medium to high. We should have a trust framework like that kind of defines and helps us monitor trust. Now, another, I don't know how many of you know about this RIIA, risk-based internal audit, that is probably, come into fray for the last couple of years for NBFCs that have reached certain AUMs. Similar model of how do I have a rating mechanism, and that is how the framework needs to be built. Now, I'm going to, each and every time I'm going to refer back and put each of us in the spotlight, okay? We have the ability to drive this, right? My only submission is we should have the courage to have the conversations. We should have the conviction to have the conversations. Right? We should believe ourselves first that this is something important for us. I was at a auto conference last week, and we had a very interesting conversation where one of the panelists, I was moderating a panel, and one of the panelists in OEM person, they had multiple lines, multiple brands of vehicles. And they actually said they do the trust equity at a brand level. We do not even elevate it to the organization level, right? And there is complete Chinese walls between each of it, right? I want to assess my trust at this particular brand, right? The brand could be a segment, like say a commercial vehicle could be a segment, passenger vehicle could be a segment, right? One could have it at a geography level, right? One could have it at a function level, right? So these are aspects that we will need to incorporate into the framework. So the more granular it gets, the more compelling and more actionable. Why do we have to do this? As I said earlier, you want to gain confidence that I am doing well in certain aspects in any of this, and I'm lagging in some of it, right? And those are the areas where one would need to fix as people who are, as organizations, that is lagging. Now, when I talk about lagging, interesting. Just spend 30 seconds reading this, right? Whatever we discussed is pretty, evident here. If one heard Mr. Gopal speak this morning, He said, he spoke about banking transactions, right? And I could immediately relate to this particular slide. And I said, when the slide comes, I'm going to refer back to that particular thing that he said. He said, this is an era where I am able to do my personal banking through phone. I'm able to do my corporate banking through phone, whether it is, redeeming mutual funds, investing, call money, night money, everything I'm able to do digitally, right? Which is very convenient. But he said, I still prefer my passbook to be printed. Right? The reason is the convenience comes with a heightened threat. Heightened threat. Right? Now, the reason why I said is this TMT and FS interrelated, right? Very interesting result of the survey. There is a very low percentage of people whom we surveyed said that they have confidence in the FS sector of how their data is going to be used and what will happen to the data that they're given to the banks or NBFCs or any other financial service. I could immediately relate it to what Mr. Gopal said. It is better to move back and kind of still have some of the aspects done in a traditional way rather than succumb to certain threats that technology may, bring to bear. Another interesting, in the auto conference again, I'm going to refer to in the US market. We all spoke about, we've been seeing, from ICE when we move to hybrid, when we are moving to EV, depending on which country and geography you are, the level of sophistication, the level of adoption varies, right? Interestingly, we are seeing a reverse trend to ICE in the US, and some of the OEM people who are sitting here can relate to it, which is having to say they have moved from ICE, which is the erstwhile car that most of us will be driving now. They moved to hybrid, they moved to EV. Now they are moving back to ICE because the benefits that are there in terms of cost of running, the cost of infrastructure is much more higher in the long run than it would be if I were to run an ICE. And in that context, I was talking to somebody. There is an Indian fully EV that has come into play 5 years back, like one of the brands. Because while everybody is talking about EV now, one should have a conversation with somebody who's got it 5 years back and see how his or her experience is now, to see if that is what they signed up for 5 years back. Right? So, what I'm trying to drive it is the trust is appreciated, but there is a significant gap in how that is getting measured and managed. I'll again pause here for thoughts because once we have kind of probably done some demystification of the topic, we will probably move on to how internal audit can play a role in this. But I'll just step back and take some questions or thoughts.
Just a point to resonate on.
Please.
On the data trust that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So today this morning in the initial session, someone mentioned that on the generative AI, targeted marketing is one of the areas that AI is big time used. And whatever the information that I get, it could result in some unwanted calls or unwanted marketing or cross-selling. So I'm totally able to relate to that. So so we should be cautious, definitely, in terms of where we are using our technology.
No, absolutely. Let me draw a parallel. I was, interacting with a mobile ad network company. Right now, for people who are aware of the concept or not aware of the concept, if you go to an Economic Times on your phone, right, you will see certain banners coming up, advertisements, right? Mobile ad networks are basically organizations that marry the Economic Times page that I am opening. The inventory is there, right, which is the open space, with the request of the advertisers, right? So if Prashant Hariharan is opening an Economic Times and Ganesh is opening an Economic Times, the ads he will see will be different from the ads that I see. And this happens in seconds. A data point 10 years before, I am not updated, 10 years back, the company was doing 83,000 ads a second. 83,000 ads a second. of the same page different people are using. What is the genesis behind it? It knows Prashant Hariharan has probably searched for a Nike shoe, or he has seen when he travel from yatra.com. I have searched for where I can go for next holiday, or I would have seen what is the upcoming Rajini movie. Though I know I don't have to search which is the upcoming Rajini movie. So if I search for upcoming Rajini movie, right, it will show ads related to that. So privacy is a myth. There is no privacy anymore. So yeah, completely agree. Any other thoughts?
So this survey is it a global survey or is it like Indian survey? Because what is the level of acceptance from Indian CEOs or Indian companies with respect to trust?
I want you guys to drive more acceptance. No, that's why I'm talking here. It's a global survey. It's a global survey. As I said, okay, let us roll back, right? And the reason why I believe this is relevant is somewhere as a country, there are a lot of catch up we are doing in some space, right? Whether it be RPA, whether it be blockchain, whether it be the AI, Gen AI, all of that, there is a 6 month to a 2 year, 3 year catch up that we play. Now, this is a concept that is globally getting significant acceptance, right? And with India probably positioned to be the third largest economy in the world, right? This is a matter of time before it reaches at scale at both levels. And which is why I strongly believe it is there for our fraternity to not ride on this. I truly believe that. It's just that we need to have that conviction. Anything else? Okay, now let's move on to how, what role can we play, right? While we touched upon some of that earlier, right? The first is being torchbearers of this concept in the organization. What does that mean? We have conversations with leaders in executive committee, in management committee, in risk committee, in audit committee, in boards about evangelizing this concept. The first and the most important role, right? Once that is done, help develop the whole framework, right? Once there is a buy-in of that, help develop that framework of how it needs to be measured, right? And they say proof of the pudding is in eating. Probably do a POC, proof of concept, in a small area where you're doing internal audit. Simple things, order to cash. Everybody does order to cash, basic audit, right? How many of us focus on this redressal that this gentleman spoke about? How many of us look at the stickiness of customers that are there? Can we have some aspects of these trust built into the audits that we are doing? Right? We do P2P, right? Do we actually measure, and I'm again referring to an MSME, we have, let us say, 35% of our vendors are MSME, but I have received complaints from 90% of the MSME for delayed payment. You do that?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Especially I'm from the banking sector. So we do lots of behavioral studies. So for us, we into deposits and lending business. That is what is the basic difference. So we do lot of behavioral studies. So is it not that is the analysis of the trust?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Right. My intent was not to say that you are not doing. The intent is to say, how do we help leaders relate that result to a trust? Right? So let me kind of further that example that you gave, right? So if you are doing a behavioral study of returning customers, if that is one of the studies that you're doing, let us say only 30% of your customers are returning customers. I'm just making up a number. Do we know why? Do we help position saying that these 70% customers are not coming because of A, B, C, D, E reason, and the major contributor of that is reason B, and we do not have a mechanism to bridge that gap of B, right? And that has probably resulted in your customers not coming back to you and going to a competition. It could be simple. You may be doing it, okay? I'm not saying you're not doing it, but how are we kind of helping the leadership see those aspects? And how are we stitching all of this together? That is what we are talking about. Each of you may be doing it, right? But do we, build all of this together to help the organization see where the deficit is, right? As I said, this MSME vendors, 90% of your vendors have raised complaint, right? And they have purposely delayed my next delivery. Do we look at it from that aspect? Customer complaints. How do we relate a customer complaint to a non-returning customer? Right? We might be doing each of this in pockets. Are we helping see the big picture of stitching all of this together? And as I said, so maybe a simple POC will help organization see the value of what this is, right? Proof of concept. So as I said, first is help, evangelize the whole concept. The second is probably do a small POC to gain confidence for ourselves, okay? That we can do it with something that will drive value. So we ourselves will build confidence. Then help develop a framework, right? This is the role that we typically play we have something called as an internal audit 4.0. This is probably an advice role, right? As an advisor to the organization that we are playing, right? Now let us assume that in the organization, there is already a framework that is there. People are measuring, like your organization, so you said, there's already something at play. Can we do an audit of that? Can we do a review of that? Right? Is there independence? Is there somebody looking at it? Right? MIS, another classic case. Right? How many of us review the MIS? MIS comes from multiple geographies, multiple plants. Right? What is the basis of those MIS? Who does the critical assessment? The plant head themselves or himself or herself or the branch head or the geography head reports. Who's doing an independent review? Is everything that needs to be brought out, right? Because we see very often see when we present, okay, I thought it was not like this because something else was reported by the business head, right? Do we help marry that? Because transparency is one of the tenets of building trust. Right? So, as I said, again, I'm repeating, help build, do some POC, and bake in some audits that drive towards this. And we've called out some areas that we can potentially consider. We discussed all of this. We spoke about, external and internal sensing, these things. Yeah. Just spend a minute, right? And relate it to some of the domains that we spoke earlier. Vendor feedback reviews. Is it in a world of agile audits? Is it worth to spend an audit on vendor feedback review? Do we do it as one sub process of P2P? Where it just loses a steam in the larger scheme of things. And we have focused reviews around it that will help us understand where our vendor ecosystem is. Succession planning, we're talking about leadership resilience, right? How strong is the organization? How resilient is the organization to leadership turbulence or to a particular incident? Whether it be cyber-related incident, breach-related incident, how resilient is the organization? How strong is the organization? Right? How are AGMs conducted? How are questions responded? Right? How transparent are they? Do we run a survey among the shareholders to understand what is their perception? It's a completely different domain, right? It is out of the comfort zone for many of us. But before anybody picks the baton and runs a next IIA meeting, we discuss how to audit the trust that somebody else is running. We have the opportunity to run. We have the opportunity to run. Okay? Do you agree? Do you concur? Does all of this kind of make sense? Any views?
Just want to get your thoughts in terms of the final output. For example, for audits, we have the audit reports, which would be very good. So we have the statements like satisfactory or good, good, really, whatever. How do you think, or any thoughts on the key output of trust when you say that we have to be the flag bearers? Can you draw parallel to that?
Yeah. So what are the leaders and laggers? Why should a particular audit be rated as unsatisfactory or satisfactory? Why can't we look at it differently? Right? What we have built a framework, right? We have a trust framework. So let us say we are doing an audit of, let us say, a DEI, right? Where do we stand against it? It is not the numbers, because numbers to HR will give, right? This is my gender diversity, this is my other parameter diversity, whatever it is, right? What are we doing for as laggers, if there are there enough measures? Are there enough owners who are driving it? Are they built in their KPIs? Right? And then you relate it back to the trust framework and say, okay, these are the 5 areas where you're lagging and we need to act on it. If we're not talking about, I like the word that Mr. Gupta used again, it is not an audit. It probably is an advice, it probably is a review, probably is an assessment, right? And that is why I position it. It is our role as advisors where we will have a larger thing to play. So I think I'm just conscious of time. We have another 7-8 minutes, but happy to take any questions, any thoughts, anything that we have. But I just wanted to introduce this concept to you, right? I'm very, very firm believer that this is something that is going to help us elevate the level of conversation, if not anything, right? Elevate or introduce this concept that is nascent in our geography. If you have parent organizations globally who are already doing this, it will be good to have the conversations with them to understand what is it that they are doing. How can we bring that into India, right? How can we help customize the framework into India? If you do not have any, how can we build it ground base, right? So the white space is there. It is for us to kind of draw it.
I have a couple of thoughts around the areas where it would contribute more than the operating part of it. Is like your CSRs. So how a company performs in that CSR, or even the climate risk, which is the happening thing, or it could be like the decisions, that ethical decisions that a company takes. Probably these could be the real parameters or the game changers. It's too early to talk about the regulatory involvement in it, but definitely these parameters which are more social and environmental.
Absolutely. It is an organization behavior. Somebody spoke about tone at the top, right? I know one of the organization where there is a employee-related fraud that happens. That organization makes that with obviously no disclosure of any name, but that event public within the organization. This particular event happened. This is the action we have taken, right? You immediately the equity of that. Somebody spoke about goodwill. Right, the equity of that particular organization within the workforce elevates because you have a sense of being treated fairly, you have a sense of being governed fairly, right? And there's no hush under the carpet, things happen. So it is a social angle, it is an environment angle, it is a human angle, right? As you rightly said, regulators, there's always a catch-up that happens. We are still talking about regulations coming on AI and GenAI. At some point it will come if it comes. But too early to talk about their intervention. But it is more the good Samrat and organization that we have. Sorry, sir, you had a point.
See, with all this happening, how soon you will find the internal auditor's place in the organization chart?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
With all this happening,
Yeah.
how soon you will find a place? Place for internal auditors in the organization chart?
How soon? So you're saying
Because in Japanese companies, I've seen, if you see the organization chart, you got a place for the internal auditors.
correct.
You don't see in India. So, with all this happening, I'm just asking you, how soon you will find internal auditors place in the organization chart for Indian companies?
Yeah, I am not sure whether I agree completely with you on Indian companies also, because I have seen
Japanese companies
organizations.
they have.
No, I'm saying I've seen Indian organizations also where it may not be coined as an internal audit. It could be a CRO, right, Chief Risk Officer, who has a role and who has a presence in the organization chart. Now, a very different perspective is where an organization chart, okay, that is key, right? Whether the position is tagged under a finance tree or whether the position is tagged under
Japanese
a
is an
CEO.
independent position.
No, I'm saying in an Indian context, while you find the place, the question and the larger issue in Indian organizations is probably where, right? Is it rightly under the CEO or administrative to the CEO and directly to the audit committee, or is it under the finance tree? That is where the challenge is. I believe we are more tilted towards being directed by finance organizations, right? Things have moved, sir. I mean, I don't truly believe that it is as directed by finance as it was probably even 5 years behind. Things have moved significantly.
Yeah.
And some of the regulatory steps have also helped in that movement. Okay. But is it all perfect? No. But I think directionally there is more independence, there is more seat at the table that I think we are getting.
Yeah.
We are getting, right? And it is because of things like this, right? Topics like this that is of interest to business that is helping us get closer and sharper into the business.
Probably one more point to complement what you said is that it is also about the industry with which we are serving. Banking is an example; it is highly regulated, so the audit function has to be independent and it has to go through the CEO or the audit committee, and it cannot be under any other function. So regulatory thing plays definitely a role, and it is very much industry specific.
Yeah, absolutely. Industry, you listed, unlisted, or certain size, what is your parent? There's multiple aspects. Regulatory banking is one classic case. I have all the time.
So it is more like a templated format, is it? Or is it whether it is inclusive? You can include, but the parameters will differ from industry or companies, right?
Yeah, this is a framework. It is a framework, right? It's a guideline. It's a guidance. You don't have to kind of, it's not Bible. It's not Bible, right? It is a guideline. You might choose to have different attributes, different aspects. You can group certain things. You can collapse certain things. You can broaden certain things. But we believe this probably is a fair contour of how it can be done. Now, on workforce experience, unless there are any questions, but feel free to ask. But something that I like workforce experience. There is something called as a culture audit, right? That we've seen some organizations conduct, right? It is a highly interactive based audit that one does. It is a measure of experience of employees, right? Very intangible, right? Very perception driven. If I was being unfairly treated, my friend believed that the organization will treat everybody unfairly, right? So it's a perception driven. It is corridor conversations driven, right? There are a lot of things that attribute to it. So organizations are going ahead with culture audits, right? Being taken very seriously. It is a questionnaire driven, it is an interview driven. There is no audit procedure for it. It is serendipity, right? I talk to 3 people, I get some gauge, I further the question, I talk to 3 more people, I further the question, I trim down the question, I broaden the question, I speak. So it's a serendipity like thing. Completely outside our comfort zone, right? We learn as we go, but the impact is huge, right? It is either comforting or it is, pretty dampening. But the key thing is, how do organizations look at it? Do they see it as an opportunity to enhance the equity, the brand quotient, the trust quotient, or do they see it as an exercise that is being done, like the thousands of surveys that happen? Very interesting thing. I just saw that and I thought I should tell you that. Conduct. The whole, how does an organization conduct itself during tough situations, during recession, during product launches, during bad press, right? How do they conduct, right? Again, nothing like a P2P, O2C where you have tons of data, you do some analytics, you kind of arrive at what are the outliers. It is not that. It is bringing to bear things that are deeper than just the numbers. The behavior of an organization, resilience of an organization, leadership capabilities of an organization, right?
Where is the vendor angle to this? Vendors.
Where is the vendor?
Supply chains.
That's about the resilience, but the vendor experience, does it play a role in terms of
customer experience? Yeah. So don't take the word customer as just customer. It's stakeholder experience of a stakeholder, vendor, customer, regulators. All of that come under that.
So just one.
Please.
So apart from the trust, we are speaking with respect to the operations, like a customer or a vendor has on the organization. Does this concept also have a binding on the trust which the management has on the audit department as such? Since we play the role of an advisor or an assurance provider.
Wow. Okay. What do you think? You know the easiest way to answer the question?
Asking this
Yeah.
question again.
Joking, right? Let me try to answer. It's a very interesting question. Very interesting question. I was not prepared for it. It's a curveball, I must admit. But I think I will lean on the question that Sir had asked, right? In Indian organizations, what do we find a place in the org chart? I think that was the question. But the deeper meaning of the question is there value that we are bringing that we find a place in the org chart? Right? Now, it is a question of, I'm going to leave the regulatory part because there are some organizations that have to have a importance placed for internal audit, whether by choice or whether by value driven or by regulatory. So regulatory from chode, let's leave that, right? It is a factor of how much value we are able to bring beyond what we can see, what they can see. That is going to help drive their trust on us. I'll tell you one example. How I measure, right, as an individual, as a professional, and how we kind of discuss as a team is, if we are able to, and stickiness somebody spoke about, right? If we are able to broaden our reach within an organization, right? That means the trust of the management is higher and higher and higher. We start the conversation with the CFO. You do 1 quarter, 2 quarters audit. We are able to have conversation with the CHR. Then we are probably able to have a conversation with the head of supply chain. Then we are probably able to have a conversation with the head of the branch of a US. Then somebody from a CT organization is having a conversation with us. All for different, us means not us as internal auditors, right? Us as a fraternity. It could be on any topic. right? It could be of any topic, which means the stickiness is higher, which means they see that we are bringing something that is helping them. And I think that is where the trust element keeps on increasing, right? The more you do, more better you do, the stickiness is there, right? Good news flies fast, bad news flies faster. So the more you mess up, the conversation will kind of will sharply fall down, and that is a good gauge. It's time. Okay. So in conclusion, thank you for patiently hearing. As I said, it's a very new topic. Hopefully, you have got a better perspective and view of how this needs to be looked at. Trust is built by keeping small promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. Very enlightening session, very refreshing change of topic, I would say. As he rightly said, we have been having data analytics, forensics, risk-based audit, operational audit. So I think it's the first time. And when KBS Manian did take some time to get back to you, because I told him in Bangalore I could listen to Prashant on this topic. It was really enriching. So let's also introduce this topic this year. And I think it was really fruitful. And just I'll take 1 second for answering this gentleman's question. I always say this everywhere, where do we fit in the organization chart? We have to earn our seat to be in the organization chart. And I firmly believe in that. I keep telling this to everyone. Unless we add value and we find ourselves pride in what we are doing as an internal auditors, whether it's in-house or external internal audits, that's where we find our place, and we need to earn our seat for that. Once again, thank you very much, Prashant.
Developing digital mindset in audit teams. We have Mr. Raman Krishnan with us, who is from Cognizant. I have the privilege of introducing the speaker to you. Mr. Raman Krishnan is a qualified CA with around 20 years experience in varied corporate governance, audit, fraud investigation functions. In his current role, he heads the internal audit team in India and part of global IIA leadership in Cognizant. He also heads the analytics team for internal audit. He has also set up a client audit management function that manages audits initiated by clients on Cognizant. He spent a good amount of time in the consulting world before stepping into the industry roles. He started his career in internal audits and then specialized into forensics. During his stint with EY, he established a forensic team in Chennai and assisted clients in various fraud prevention and investigation assignments. Subsequently, he was head of special audits in Sanmar, a diversified Chennai-based business group, after which he moved on to head the ethics and compliance in Sun Edison India, a US headquartered renewable energy player. Over to you, Ramakrishnan, please.
Before you proceed further, I wanted to check, are there any specific aspects that you want us to focus on in this discussion? Because I know we've already been through certain sessions in the morning, and to a large extent we've covered the topic of digital audit, digital transformation, digital mindset also was touched upon in different contexts. So is there any specific areas that you want us to focus? Otherwise, we'll start with the general slides and we can make it interactive as we go along as well. And at the outset, I also apologize, I've got a bad throat, so please tolerate me coughing. Right. I'll try my best not to confuse anyone. I did get a warning from a primary school going child. You're saying you're going to develop digital mindset, make sure that you don't confuse anyone over there and make them lose their mind. So take it with a pinch of salt, but we'll go ahead. This slide talks about a very high level as to where we are. We all know that every industrial resolution and revolution, there has been significant change that has happened. So now we are in the fourth wave. This is obviously going to bring along a lot of changes for us, right? So the better prepared we are, the easier it is to deal with that. And if you are not prepared, I think the wave will consume us. Right? This again talks at a very high level on the stages of how we've been through the audit life cycles. Initially it was with the paper, and now we finally landed with the digital, and in between we have the various categories as well. In most cases, probably we've not come out of it completely. There may be trails of paper audits as well in some places. But to a large extent, you look at it, today we are in the digital world. Right? The reality show has started effectively. So why do we need to be a digitally savvy auditor? Right? The truth is, if you're not, please be aware that someone else is already working to be a digital auditor. So if you're not going to be there, you're out of it. Right? It's a very simple truth, brutal as it is. That is the reality. I keep telling everyone that I meet, if someone's got a 20-year career ahead of you, better transform now. Otherwise, you will not sustain 20-25 years of corporate life. Whether it's going to be in the audit line or any other corporate role that you move, if you're not going to be upskilling yourself, if you're not going to be transforming yourself, it is not going to be available for you. Right? That's the reality. You may ask that, okay, today I'm paid to do X, why should I do Y? If you don't learn to do Y, tomorrow you'll not have X also. Simple. You may be paid only for X, you may be underpaid for X also, but if you do not master X plus Y, you will not get it. That's how fast the corporate world is changing. Right? What if the function itself does not transform? You as an individual may be okay to do certain things, but what happens if the function is not ready to transform? That is your company, internal audit functions or internal controls or an external audit team. If you're a professional services entity, if your service line is not willing to change, then what happens? Right? The traditional auditors will vanish. The services will no longer be required, whether it's going to be an internal audit or an external audit or let's say a transaction advisory. If you're going to stick on to the traditional norms of audit, your days will be numbered. Right? The only variable factor will be, depending on the industry and the company that you're in, your longevity may be determined. If the industry itself has not transformed very well, maybe you'll have a longer shelf life. If you're in an industry which is transforming itself very fast, your days will definitely be numbered very quickly. Right? At the same time, what if the function really transforms? If the function transforms also, you are not likely to have the same old traditional audit role, but you'll start getting new roles. The mandate for the audit firms, audit companies, audit teams will change. Right? Therefore, you'll be able to undertake new works, deliver new services to the clients or the internal stakeholders. It's not really going to be the same old function. It is set for big changes. Right? Now, how do you make myself future-proof? Similar stuff. First thing is, okay, do I really understand my stakeholders' expectation? Here I put stakeholders as an open cap over there, because stakeholders can be very different for different people, different times, different teams. Right? Your stakeholder could be the audit committee, it could be your CXOs, it could be your team members, and if you're an external service provider, it could be your clients as well, it could be any different type of stakeholder. But do I really understand my stakeholders' expectation? That's a moot question for you to think over. I'll take a pause here. So, any doubts on what do you mean by stakeholder expectation? Are the people who are expecting you to just deliver complaints agenda? Did I pay my tax on time, TDS on time? Did I file my returns on time? Is the expectation that basic from your stakeholder? Or are they going to be looking at value-added delivery from you guys? Yeah. If the expectation is basic, today they may not tell you, but very soon they'll be replacing you. Because you don't need an external person or another specialized internal audit team to come and say that, okay, I did not pay my tax on time, there was a delay, whatever reason. Right? It used to be probably complex for probably a decade back to get that information, pass it on to the head office, but today it's available to them. And more often than not, they know that they've delayed. Right? So, are you going to have a value add by telling that, okay, I did not do the taxes on time? There's hardly any value for them. They may accept that report, but nothing's going to happen based on your report. Right? So, what are the quality of value that you're giving to the client? That makes a lot of difference. Right? Like I said, the quality of information that is available in the company is changing so drastically. Right? Long ago, this type of quality of information is not available. There used to be days when people used to send information by CDs, ROMs, everything, but today nothing is there, it's all live. In most cases, by the time you hit the save button, it's immediately available over there in the head office, right? Or in a decentralized environment also, your plant manager or regional manager, everyone's going to be aware of it. So there's nothing much that you're going to gain by not looking at the comprehensiveness of data. The less focus on data, the less value it will be giving. Right? Again, regulations are very transformative these days. The age-old regulations are vanishing. Again, if the same government is going to be there by next year or post-May, you will see a host of new legislations also that will come through, which is going to be simplifying a lot of stuff. And now when regulations are being introduced, it is introduced with the mindset that, okay, it's going to be digital. Today, GST, while we may all have a business complaint against GST, which is also probably getting resolved to a large extent, the way GST has been administered is fantastic. Or today they're saying that the income tax department is ready to waive demands of less than 1 lakh. They're willing to let it go. 80-20 rule. Let those guys go. So long as they're paying taxes, I'm okay with that. Right? And why they're saying? Because all these guys are anyway slowly increasing the tax contributions, so they're willing to let it go. So if that is the type of case, that's the approach from the government, you can understand how corporates are going to be reacting as well. Right? If there's a change in regulation to that extent, the cost of monitoring will start reducing on certain aspects. I'm not saying that all legislations are simple. One of the most complicated that we'll be dealing with is going to be on the privacy, cyber security and all that is going to be extremely complex, no doubts. But the traditional laws that are coming in is going to be much simpler to deal with. Right? The government itself will start giving some tolerance as well. Thank you so much, sir. Right? So with that in mind, we need to shift our focus from regulatory compliance and other internal policy compliance. Right? Like I mentioned, regulators are getting tech savvy. Whether we like it or not, I know of instances where, including my company, if there is a case where, let's say, your PF contribution is not done or it's low. Since we are a big company, if our contribution doesn't go on a particular day, they get worried. Will you pay it on time? Right? Because they have their targets to meet. If they have their targets to meet, they are going to be more savvy and following up on the compliance side. But it's not going to be, coming into your office and asking. They are the thing. And they are so market friendly and aware of the market such that if there is news, let's say the IT industry is reducing their headcount, which very often hits the headlines. Regulators start calling. What is going to be the impact? Right? Is my circle contribution going to reduce? Because if their contribution reduces, they are being questioned and they start following up. Of course, on a case where people are being let go or the headcount is going to reduce, they'll accept it, no doubt. But you understand the mindset in which they are operating. They don't want their inflows to be reduced. To that extent, they're monitoring. Right? While I mentioned the previous point, the transformative is there and tech savvy is there, both put together, if they have effective monitoring, the compliance of it will be automatic. We don't need to be an external party to go and tell them that you need to comply. The push and pull of the regulations will take care that the compliance is met. Right? This one is interesting. So when I started my career, I keep saying that, I have been made to carry this huge CENVAT registers, quite bulky to carry. It used to be there, but today those registers have vanished. Right? I don't see anyone doing a reconciliation of RG1, RG23, all the GST input and all that. Everything is done on the system. Right? And that used to be a line 3 check at some point. Today that is all in line 1 to a very large extent. Most companies you see, the ERP takes care of it. Right? And of course, as auditors, we've also transformed from that level. We're doing very different roles now. But if you don't see the opportunity to transform now, it's going to be very difficult. With the advent of technology, which is moving so rapidly, what we did not think through in the past will be taken care of in line 1. And if most of these are getting to line 1, then you have a line 2 function effectively taking care of what line 3 will do. So as line 3 auditors or as external service providers to companies, what would be our role? Right? If you do not transform, it's going to be very difficult. So that mindset has to come in. Today the expectation is not on sample check. Whatever we do, they want it to be comprehensive. It has to be accurate and real time. If you're going to give something which is dated, doesn't add value to them. Right? Even if you take an audit, let's say today you are in the month of February, if you take an audit cutoff of December saying that, okay, up to Q3 if it's April-March cycle or Q4 if it's Jan-December cycle, you start your audit now and you take 3 months to deliver the report, people are not going to be so appreciative of the output, even if it's going to have very significant findings. Because by then if they've identified it themselves, they would have acted on it. And if you have to be really honest to ourselves, right, half the issues that you identify will be known to the business. we may be living under a myth that, okay, we are coming up with observations. If you've been on the other side of the table, if you have friends on the other side of the table, your stakeholders are real trusting partners, you ask them on a serious, informal conversation, they will tell, okay, a lot of it is known. Just that they wouldn't have probably voiced it out for various reasons, right? But if that is also known to the management, at some point they're going to think, okay, what am I getting from the auditor? Right? So if you're going to say that, okay, 1 out of 10 samples failed, it's not going to help. Right? So what do you mean by really going digital? All these are there. These are all fancy words that are there. It all makes sense. Various nuances. It means different things to different people, different companies, different context. Right? I don't have anything specific to discuss. So if you want to discuss anything specific over here, we can. Otherwise, this was just more for information. For you to observe, okay, what's there over there. In your stakeholder discussion, it's always good to use these terminologies. Whether it makes sense or not, I think they're going to like these terminologies. At least for that, you can use it. Right? Now, the audit world, I've tried to categorize it various sections over here, which will be typical for any auditor, whether it's an internal auditor or an external auditor or a service provider. These are going to be relevant. Now, if you have to look at it from a digital mindset, how would you approach any of these sections? Are you comfortable in these areas, or do you have anything specific you would like to focus on in this one? You can make it interactive. I'm fine with that. Okay.
I also have how do you digitize risk assessment? Because somebody, a lot of people believe that when you do risk assessment, I think you'll have to talk to people, talk to those, functional heads or the CXOs, and ask them the question as to what keeps them awake in the night. Right? So I think it's more of a human interactive thing, the risk assessment. So when you have to digitize risk assessment, what is the change in approach that you will adopt for risk assessment?
It's a very valid point. You cannot eliminate that human touch because they may not be willing to put it in writing even if you exchange it through digital means. In my company, the way we follow it is we do have an initial section that's going to be on a digital footprint. We have a form that they share their inputs on. Subsequently, follow through with a further reduced number of people with whom we have an informal, one-to-one catch-up, which is when some of the information does come out. So that is definitely there. But even when it comes out over there, we have those, today we have tools which is going to capture the summaries of discussion, which is going to give the inference, the key highlights. Today Copilot does wonderful summary notes, right? Of course, you need to refine. If you ask it to generate a summary note, it will tell in one line saying that, okay, X and Y discussed on ABC and this is the summary. It will be one line which may not be sufficient for you. But if you prompt it to give detailed notes, line by line notes, then it generates better transcripts. And there's a separate transcripts module as well. So those will help. And then an aggregate of all that will give an inference of what are the themes that are being coming out with different stakeholders, right? And then we follow through with the executive committee and then finally goes to CFO, CEO, then the board. All that we can do. But that can be partially digitized. We haven't done it completely. In the past, we also tried risk rating also, but then those are sensitive areas and depends on the board's appetite. Some boards would want to put a risk rating for certain risks. Some do not want it because if you put a particular rating on a risk and tomorrow, let's say I rate something as low and tomorrow that becomes a big issue for the company, they wouldn't be want to caught on the wrong side. So therefore, certain aspects are still sensitive to the management's expectations or the board's expectation. But I would say that technology does exist to automate those aspects also. Yeah, right.
I want to add to that, what we also see is as part of risk assessment, what we may do is also that we need to be aware of some of these emerging risks. That we may have to refer to a lot of partners and all those publications. And I believe some options you're exploring is to see if I can automate some of these things. Some kind of a tool which picks up the most relevant things for us. So it's a more focused. I cannot eliminate the manual intervention completely, but there is still some bit of technology support that we can bring. That we want to know what is a competitive landscape from an ERM perspective. Maybe that would require us to read through so many annual reports
hundreds of people. There is a bit of, some bit of automation. Like Raman mentioned, the manual interventions cannot be completely done away with. There is still, areas that we can consider.
We have web crawlers which are picking up competitive intelligence and new risks that are emerging. All the web crawlers there.
As you spoke, this also struck my mind. So we do have alerts, right? So all this fraud alert and all those things. So even when you have that kind of a system, that is also digitizing your risk.
Correct.
So those areas are kind of red and it can alert you.
Yeah. We've deployed mechanism which certain risks are constantly tracked and competitive intelligence, those things are now taken care of. And it prepares a neat summary also. Earlier, like you said, it just used to give alert. Today it's collating that and giving a summary as well. So it makes the job that much more easier. It will read through 10 alerts and summarize that.
But other external factors would also form part of it, like in the entire control environment the particular organization or the industry operates. So we'll get to know the updates or what is the governance control or political or economic threat that the industry or the company would face in the respective sector through the control environment. So that whether we get to know, would this impact the organization risk assessment or would it impact the recurrent risk that they perceive?
Okay, so let me try to summarize it to make sure I understood it right. So if you're looking at scenarios where all the external factors are getting addressed in your risk assessment and plan, right? Yeah, it does. We have an annual planning concept, right, which is then modified every quarter, right, depending on all the external factors. And we need to assess internally also. See, if you have a set of, let's say, 20-member team, so many X man-hours available, you can deliver only so much of audits. If there's a new risk that I want to address, I need to drop off something as well. So I need to get that balance right. So while I have my mechanisms to identify new risk, I also need to have a mechanism to see which audits I can drop, and therefore sort of have an in and out to make sure it's balanced. But the process exists by which we capture the risk, and if there's a change in the risk elevation of pattern, that influences my audit plan. And we change it on a quarter basis, take it to the board, get the approval, all those things happen.
Would there be any risk intelligence tool, like trying to get into the past year finding in each of the business unit and to figure out like how far they have better control mechanism in place in each of the business unit, and also the emerging risk, both can be correlated together to filter out like, okay, these are the business unit where I had major issues in last 5 years. That gives a trend analysis for us to give a base for our current year plan.
Yeah, I've done it in another company for a different purpose. In my current role, we do it partially over there because we have sufficient information which is existing outside of the database, so we haven't put it over there. But the process exists. Our audit plan is influenced by the past issues, prevailing risk that is voiced out by the stakeholders, then external factors like what's happening in the market, plus the research material from Gartner and other Big Four as well. So all these factors put together influence my audit plan overall. So the past audit issues are definitely there. If we issue an adverse opinion saying that, okay, the audit has been unsatisfactory or bad for whatever reason, then by default we have a process to re-audit that, irrespective of what the risk stating is. Because you want to make sure that what was sort of below the average level comes up the curve. So that is a process. But at that point in time, if you figure out that the risk perception has changed, or if that process is going to undergo a transformation, then we take a informed call of not doing an audit at that point in time. Yeah. You want to touch upon analytics? Any specific stuff you want to touch on analytics on that?
No, I just wanted to know in this new digital how different would it be forward, because we do a lot in our organization in terms of analytics to drive past trends, to drive it, what you just mentioned, where this is not possible to exist. So I just wanted to know from your experience in your organization, which you have for thinking to digitize it to get it more quickly. First slide you talked about speed. It's a very valuable point. So do the audit budget could be very fast. How do we get there faster to do the audit and then profit?
Right. My answer may not fit every organization because the structure may slightly vary. In some companies, it's done by line 1, line 2 itself, which will give the insight. For me, in my department, we have a risk department, internal audit department, which rolls up to the same leader, but we have two separate teams that manage. So, and we have individual functions which also generate their monthly insights for the key functions, right, depending on what the factor is. So those analytics insights themselves will give us an indicator of how the trend is shaping up, right? So is there a necessity for an auditor in the third line of defense to take over and look at it, or build new analytics is a question that we try to address. Some analytics which are being done by the line one of the respective user function is sufficient enough for us to go through it and take it forward. In some cases, we build our own dashboards. We did initially think about building it and passing it on to the stakeholders, right? The third line of defense builds up dashboards and then pass it on to the stakeholders, line 2 or line 1. After that, we sort of shelved that idea, and we're now doing things which are going to be consumed within internal audit. If there is a need, if someone's going to ask for it, we pass it on. So now we want to use that insights for our own consumption. The reason is in our company, we have put an additional process that if anything is going to be published internally also, there are various protocols to be followed. So we thought it's much simpler for us to consume it internally. Now, what level of insights do we generate? Like I said, varies by process. In some companies, it is the strongest line 2 that generates the data insights. If the line 1 functions are using adequate systems, then it is better that the line 1 functions themselves do it. We are not too keen to look at a continuous auditing in my team at this point in time, because the cost of operation will end up being high. Because on certain functions, we know that the operational discipline may not be there, but the business risk is not high. For example, if I do not raise a purchase order and get the material, there is a process deviation. But so long as I paid the right rate, the right quantity, and I received something, I'm not actually losing so much by not raising a purchase order. Right? So with that insight, what am I going to do? So those are things that we're okay to let go. Which is why I said, today the expectation from auditors is more value add. By saying that purchase order was not followed, people are not going to see a value add over there. So there are certain insights that we are willing to let go and focus only on certain aspects where there will be a problem. If there is a deviation in rate, that is something that management will be interested. Or let's say if I didn't make the payment on time, or if I did not get the goods on time, those are stuff which the business can live with. Because in those cases, if there's a problem, the business will cry. And if the business is crying, they will reach out to the vendor and get the stuff. So there's no value in we telling that, okay, some of these operational metrics are not being followed. So what is a KRA or a KPI that I want to track will determine what type of analytics that I want to build. Yeah? Not everything is going to be a value add. I don't know if they answered your question. We definitely seek management inputs. Certain cases, I would say it's more collaborative. Depending on the reasons that they give, if you're convinced with it, we take it. Otherwise, we still push it, saying that we will report it. You can give a response saying that I'm not bothered about it, I don't want to act on it. You give a response. If we feel that it is significant enough, we don't drop it. Yeah. There we agree to disagree and move forward. And more often than not, if you say that you're going to put pen to paper and it's going to go in the final report, they will definitely think twice before they say it is not relevant for them. If they really believe it is not relevant, then they give that. Others, most often, they'll say, okay, we'll do it in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, then they'll eventually accept it. But they'll try pushing their luck. Any company, anyone will have them pushing their luck to drop anything from the audit list. So that's their job. Yeah. This slide talks about all the advantages and disadvantages of going, challenges in going digital, right? The biggest advantage of going digital is, you get to have a bird's eye view of the risk over there. So you have a more predictable model that you can see. Right? It helps you anticipate, but as a third line of defense, I would be cautious before we get into predictive risk. Individually, I'm not too much in favor of getting to predictive risk modeling. The reason is, okay, if do I need to run the function myself? Right? If I'm going to say that tomorrow I'm going to make a mistake, that's not my job. That's the line manager's job. So why should I really get into it? I'll have the technology to do it, but do I really want to get into it at this point in time? Really not. I have enough things on my plate to deal with. It's definitely good. Technology is good. That is required for the company. The only point of reflection is, should it be done by the third line or the second line or the first line? I would prefer that it is done by the second line or the first line. That's my personal preference. Right? Because we need to get into, okay, next week you're going to do something wrong. It becomes a point of debate itself. They'll say, yeah, even I knew I would have addressed it anyway. So why put in that effort and go there all the way? If they're dealing with it, they can. Right? The second bullet talks about the increased influence and advisory. Right? This is something that's very relevant. We are no longer expected to give a compliance-based audit. If you're giving value add, it has to be trusted by them. Are they open enough to accept your advice? Do we know the business enough to give them an advice in the first place? Right? How well have you understood the business will be a direct reflection of how well they trust you. If your understanding of the business is poor and you give some theoretical observation which may be good on paper, it's not going to cut ties with them. They're not necessarily going to accept your inputs. They may give a response, all that will be on paper, but behind the scenes it's not going to be a value add for them. Right? Third one talks about agility. Like I said, as part of the risk assessment itself, what we do has to be reflected on the quality of deliverable. And if you're agile and we're changing tracks, it helps. Otherwise, it's not going to be a value add. Data-driven decision making. This is something very important. In almost all observations that we talk about, the question invariably comes out, what is the exception rate? If you say it is a process non-adherence, the next question is, okay, what happened because of that? Yes, I did not follow a process, but what did I lose? If it's not going to be a value for them, people would be willing to discount that. There are certain things that they tell us openly and officially, certain things you get to hear informally from them, certain things they don't even tell us, but action will be taken behind the scenes. If they are going to give their own feedback to the management and the audit committee saying that we are not seeing any value from the audit team, that will reflect on the next year's budget that they're going to give, right? In terms of how are they going to support you in your technology change, shift, transformation, your people budget, it will start reflecting. So we need to have that in mind and look at how comprehensive is my analysis going to be. With the data being available, it is essential that we do complete annual data minimum. Multi-year analysis is the next big thing that's going to come. How is my current year performance vis-a-vis the previous year's performance? What has missed? How have I improved? Those trends, patterns, benchmarks will be very relevant. Otherwise, whatever controls that they built in the line 1 and line 2 will take care of process adherence to a large extent. The outliers that you have will be responded by them. So we need to give those business insight which can be driven only through data. Like you mentioned, the data analytics, that becomes a key focus area. How do I really give value over there? The data availability and quality on the right side that I mentioned top right, that is something that we face even now. Any large company, there are certain processes where the data is not necessarily of great quality. It could be a critical process or non-critical process, but the data is not going to be so good. The error rate, exception rate is going to be so high that will make the analytics sometimes redundant or non-value add. In those cases, I would suggest that we do basic analytics to call out the hygiene problems, escalate and go forward rather than doing deep dive over there. Right. Skill sets and resources, that's a big challenge that we have. Every company will go through it. This is something that we've always been facing, whether it's going to be a skill set for doing a regular process audit, process skill set, or IT audit. Now today, data-oriented skill sets, digital, it is always going to be a scarce commodity. We just need to find our own ways to deal with that. Right? If you don't have the right skill set and we embark on something, it can be quite a bit of counterproductive effort over there. Because the bigger problem on data analysis, if something goes wrong, we may not be able to identify also. If you cross that particular stage where we do not apply our guardrails in getting the logic right, algorithm right, or formulas right, and we go forward with that, we may not even notice the error unless the stakeholder points it out. and that can be a bit embarrassing. Right? So how do I upskill myself, my team? How do we partner with the business? Becomes very important. And today, I don't think everyone's got the luxury of saying, okay, I'll work for 4 hours and I'll train for 4 hours. It's not going to be there. You're probably going to be working for 8 hours or even maybe 10 hours and then upskill for the remaining 2 hours maybe. But if you don't do that, again, like I mentioned, you're going to be out of the market. Somewhere it's a give and take relationship, right? As an individual, I know that I'm not giving my team the liberty to do this 4+4. It's always going to be 8+2 or 10+2, whatever it is. But today that's how it works. And those who are interested put in that effort, they learn, they upskill, they transform, and they move forward. And those who do not will have their own risk that they need to deal with in the future. It's going to be a different type of risk that they need to deal with. The cultural adoption, that's something that we faced in my current company and in my earlier roles in other organizations as well. Anything new, there will always be an inherent resistance for change. Yeah? Especially when you say that I've analyzed all your transactions, this is your error rate, which probably they wouldn't have done it themselves in some cases. So the initial reaction is, okay, I will not accept it. I will check and come back. And the checking will be a never-ending process. They'll find their own sweet spot of delaying things, because until they confirm, you can't release your formal report. So that's a technique if they're going to use, then it will go on forever. We take in a hard stance saying, okay, if it's not going to come in beyond a point, we want to issue the report without their action plans or response. And it goes to the management, then we seek a response. Once it goes there, then once it comes tops down, then the response will start trickling in. We do that. Of course, you can't do it for every audit. You do 3 times, 4 times, that will also lose its value. So you'll have to be really judicious on, when do you really exercise that trump card. Use at the right time, it gives the right message to different stakeholders. But that's something which is very sensitive, because if you don't partner with them, then taking their support for the upcoming future engagements will be a bit of a challenge. Right? The pace of change, we've already discussed about that.
Question. When we devote any observation, we take a sample out of it, we check and we give a percentage saying that this is the percentage of exception and this has resulted in so much of impact to the business. But when the management perceives that, they take a different stand and they compare it with a different denominator and they arrive at a different percentage, comparing the overall total population. So how do we take that and go ahead with that difference in the percentages that play an important role in deciding whether this is really significant or not?
Very valid point. It's just a perception they need to manage with them, right? If you're doing a comprehensive analysis of, let's say, total population is 100, out of that 100, you have 10 high-risk samples that you're selecting, and out of the 10, let's say 3 failed. You can always say 3 by 10 or 3 by 100. We would prefer to say 3 by 10, they would prefer to say 3 by 100, right? That's the message. We convey very clearly that, okay, it's 3 on 10 on a total of 100. So bring in the denominator also over there so that they get the perspective. We make it clear in your response, if you want to tell it it's 3 by 100 and therefore 3%, we will take it as 30% because it's 3 by 10. But if I'm taking a sample based on data and text, internally I do know that, okay, it's a high risk sample that I've already selected. When I'm selecting, I myself know that the 90 is not posing a major risk, right? If it is that case, I sort of accept that response, because I know that it's a fact. The 90 is not much of a problem. But if my analytics is throwing out a very high error rate, then I avoid getting into the sample testing of 10, and then I would probably say that 50 out of 100 is seeming to be a problem. Right? Because out of that 50, if I select a few, then it could be that the error rate is actually smaller. But if my sampling is indicating that my risk is higher, then I would call out that risk over there. If I'm convinced that the 90 is not much of a problem, I sort of let it go. Yeah.
Analysis out of it. So
Very valid point. We also face that. If it is going to be a one-off case, one department out of, let's say, 5 departments, if it's a issue, we sort of give them the opportunity to change the data quality over a period of time. But if 4 out of 5 have an issue, then we start making the noise in the right levels. If something is grossly incorrect, or stakeholders say it is not valid, we take their buy-in and report it to the board also. Sorry, it may not necessarily be in the same audit report, but in our one-on-one with the audit committee chair or in the formal audit committee setting, we do convey that, okay, the data quality is issue sometimes. We do escalate. And after that, they reach out to the respective function owners to get that. In one of my earlier organizations, if that issue persists for the next year as well, we ask that respective function leader to come to the audit committee and explain. Not just for data quality, any serious issue. Let's say we give them 5 observations that they need to act on and they did not do it. Then we ask them to come to the audit committee and directly explain why they were not able to implement. So sometimes that puts that pressure on them to deliver. So take them directly to the audit committee. If you put them in front of the CFO, CEO, it's not going to make a difference for them. Right? Again, it depends on scenario. Sometimes the CFO and CEO could also be really tough on them and get them to clean up the act. In one situation, it really helped to have that direct visibility to the audit committee. And that was an audit committee that was extremely tough. They wouldn't take no for an answer. So that helps. But if it's a genuine case where they do not have the wherewithal to clean up the data, then I would position it more as a business risk for the enterprise, saying that tomorrow you cannot defend anything. If it's going to be financial data, my simple point is tomorrow you cannot face any regulator. If it's going to be operational data, let's say that tomorrow if you incur a loss also you can't remediate. So depending on the function where the data is a problem, we highlight it accordingly to extrapolate and give visibility to the business risk over there. Any point that you say that as an auditor I am not able to do it, it is not going to be seen as a big problem for them. Because auditor's problem is not the company's problem. Right? Only company's problem gets acted on. Auditor's problem is not necessarily acted upon. Right? That's the reality. You are expected to deal with your problem. So you position the business problem, there's a better possibility of getting traction around it. Today, if you do research on digital audits and all that, Excel is considered almost manual. Right? Today, that's the reality. So, the basic that you look at, I would say Power BI and Alteryx are very easy to learn from an end user perspective. I have not been a master of it myself. I've been negligent of not learning it enough. But when I did have the opportunity, yes, that is something that is user friendly. Alteryx user friendly. I got some of my team members who have gone ahead and learned Tableau, R, SQL also on their own. Process planning as well. I have one of my colleagues also over there. He's a chartered accountant by background, but today he deals with data in a very fantastic way. He's done the tools by himself. Right? So there are people who are over there. But the minimum skills that you expect, if you're looking at analytics and visual, I would say SQL and Power BI is good enough to start with, depending on the complexity of the data. SQL by and large should be able to deal with large volumes. If you're getting to process mining, other predictive analytics, that's the next stage. But Power BI is very simple. And today, Microsoft is coming with Copilot and all that. Today, it's interesting, if you put it in Copilot or ChatGPT and ask it to write a basic observation, it does it in a very nice way. Right? Simple observations can be obtained from the tool very easily. So you don't need everyone to do it. In a matter of time, you'll have a repository of observations. Right? And then after that, it's very easy. Today, if you look at an audit firm, as an individual corporate auditor, you may have certain challenges. But if you're going to look at it from an audit firm perspective, you're doing audit for 10 different clients. In a year's time, you'll probably have a repository of audit observations. It's just going to fetch it very easily for you. Right? From a technical skills perspective, analytical skill perspective, I'd say yes, Power BI is something that is easy to start with.
This
different is it away from automation? For example, today, I have my control assessment as an internal auditor. I have my control assessment. My workflow is through an application, and dashboards or reports are extracted from the application. They are interactive. The board can, do scenario planning. Is that considered digital or?
It would be, yeah. In my opinion, I think it would be. I may not be a master in that, but yes, I would consider that, to a large extent digital. The process flow digital part of it is one. The playing around the data is another one. That is an area that's going to evolve very significantly. But on the other side, if you establish process flows and if your board is able to access through digital, I think your job is largely done.
That also depends on
the underlying.
Them providing the data points to me, right? I mean, if they are hybrid, for example, they have a mix of manual plus whatever, ERP is an automated. And I still end up collecting all the data manually and feeding it my audit tool. So I can consider IIA as digital, but
correct. That to that extent is the dependencies then on the organization's maturity, how it goes, and some of it calls for significant investment. It's not going to be easy there. So we make do with what is possible. So we try to eliminate the manual touch points wherever possible. If you're getting to an extract also, we try to make sure that the report is just put into a SharePoint immediately for extract and then access it directly with limited intervention.
For business owner, automation of process is more important than automating my function.
Correct. To a large extent, our automation will depend on how the business transforms itself. Yeah. And if the business transformation is faster than the audit transformation, then we have a problem. Right?
It still makes Excel the king. I can get clean looking, visually appealing dashboards and reports.
Yeah.
And if the data is accurate, you said that it has to be accurate, timely, comprehensive. I achieve all those three parameters.
Correct. It serves a purpose. So, if I can get it done, then that's fine. There's no point putting more money behind that. So the return on investment comes in, and we're not going to get the budget in these scenarios. So yeah, so we'll have to live with that.
Right. Thanks for validating.
Yeah. So how do I really start moving ahead? First thing, like I said, audit committee and management. So that's address your point directly. They'll be pretty okay to take this output and work with that. Right? If you do not have the audit committee's buy-in, it's very difficult to make any sort of change in the organization. You're not going to get any support. If it's a private limited, then the management's roles come into play. If these stakeholders are not going to support, we can bury the dream and then continue as is. Right? That is the reality. Because no one is going to put an investment specifically for audit. The only way it can then move forward is to highlight the business risk, saying, okay, if you do not transform your organization, then there is a customer risk, or there's a performance risk, a growth risk, leakage. All those things will have to be used and make sure that they align. Otherwise, it will not go through. External auditors alignment is also extremely important. At least for us, if we bring in any bot also, they want to make sure that it is validated, they are comfortable, it performs well. And for rightful reasons, right? Something blows up, they are going to be at risk. So they want to make sure that it's there. And of course, if it's logical, they have cleared it. It's not that they do not give that approval. But after validating, they do. And they are more comfortable with bots. If I talk about AI, they're extremely worried. Right? Because a bot is designed to do what you tell it to do. AI will become smart and sometimes over smart. It thinks on its own, sometimes for rightful reasons, sometimes not for rightful reasons. And people have seen that the output of AI is not necessarily the same for the same level of transaction. So that one could be an error rate, and second thing is it learns from the past transaction, then gives an output. Right? If you're going to have 10 transactions that are deviating, the 11th time it sees that, it will take that as a normal transaction. Right? So how do you control that? That becomes a significant factor. So it learns from incorrect transactions also. So we'll have to keep telling that incorrect transactions has to remain incorrect. Right?
So it's both ignorant and as well as over smart.
Yeah. That becomes a problem. So today, practically for us, going on the wrong side of the road is not so much of a problem unless there's a heavy traffic. Right? We bring in all those caveats, and if it's not impacting anyone, what's wrong in going on the wrong side of the question that we ask, right? So AI starts applying that logic. Tomorrow something goes wrong, it is not going to point out. So for that reason, I don't think our auditors will clear. Most auditors will not clear if it's going to be part of their procedures that they're going to rely on the company on. If they're going to build their own they'll be slightly more comfortable, which is understandable, but not something that's going to come from us. You mentioned investments for transformation. If this is not there, nothing can be done. No point trying all that. And whatever you're doing, we'll have to look at it from a comprehensive assessment. If you're going to say that by putting in technology, I will still do a sample-based audit, they'll send us out of the room right away. Right? And after putting that investment, if you're going to again talk about sample-based outcome, we are not doing justice to our job, and sooner or later they'll take their own decisions on that. Right? Continuous learning, upscaling, we touched upon it. Encourage a team to innovate and grow. Right? We are as good as a team. Everyone in the team has to move along. If there are certain people who are doing extraordinarily well, give them the room to grow. One shouldn't be constraining the other person's growth. Right? And if there are certain people who are not willing to grow and they have their certain challenges, we'll have to see how we can navigate that and accommodate them to the extent possible, but so long as it doesn't conflict with the other person's growth. Right? But if we're not allowing our team members to be innovative and grow, it will be suicidal. Right? Every individual at the bottommost level or our immediate step down or our peers, we have to have that continuous encouragement to grow, even if they're going to go beyond us. I think we'll have to have that acceptance and embrace that. This is important. If you're starting a transformation journey, start with something small. My personal advice would be don't take up something really complex to show value. Complex data projects have its own challenges to deal with, not easy to overcome. So it's better to showcase some small wins, proof of concepts, gather management support, gather appreciation, then embark on something big. If it's a large process, probably try to break it down, show a smaller deliverable, and then move forward. If you're not able to demonstrate value to the enterprise, the initiatives will be shut down. You will not get support because not everything is going to be revolving around money alone. Right? For any data project that you do or any transformation that you do, you need the buy-in or time from the respective process owners. If they do not see value and they start complaining saying, okay, internal audit is asking me to spend a lot of time, I don't see a value in that, it gets shut down. So make sure that we're able to show that value to the enterprise and move forward. Last but not the least, I would say it is important, whether it is going to be benefiting the audit function or not, be a part of the business transformation so that you understand the business changes that are happening. It may not help you today, but it will help you tomorrow. If you do not understand the transformation that's happening now, it will be difficult for us to plug in later and then deliver. These are some fundamental risks of going digital as well. This is sometimes overlooked, but this can have a major impact as well. Data breach. In the good old days of restricted, manual or pen drive or CD level information, it is unlikely that it will go out. But today if you put in a cloud, it's very easy for the data to get shared. A printout has to be photocopied before someone takes. But today if you're going to have everything in a digital footprint, you may not even know that someone has taken it. We may not realize for months together, years together until it comes out as well. Right? So how do you really manage that data is something very critical. One is to secure access for people, and within the function also, how do you restrict access for data, and how do you keep a backup? The bottom may seem funny. What if it is too safe to access? Personally, I've been through it as well. There are times when people put a password to a file, they exit the company, and tomorrow you can't open that file also. Right? What starts with a file goes to a folder, to a SharePoint, sometimes to the entire project. Right? We face these practical nuances. How do you deal with it? Something that we'll have to have our own innovative ways of dealing with it, but it's a real risk. Right? Similarly, on the data privacy side, today the privacy regulations are going to be extremely complex. In a particular data set that you get, even if you did not want PI information, it may contain PI. And as auditors, we will want unedited data. Like we discussed, we want it directly from the system. It comes with the cost of PI information. So how do we deal with it? How do we protect it? Once you get the data, it's your responsibility. Right? In the
So is there a very clear definition of what is PIA? We all keep saying PIA, but so my question is, merely say collecting a name and a email, is that PIA? Or how I understand it is, as long as I'm able to trace it back to a individual,
yeah.
that is PIA. But anything else, so I don't have a name, which I just have a number or say the address or the email address of it. I don't have the designation position.
On a standalone basis, yes, it would be considered PI. It would not be. It will not be. But if you have 3 or 4 standalone information which, if collated together, then you run that risk, and invariably we are likely to have that information. You collect something for different data points, you get it. Right? So you end up getting it. Practical cases, I was talking to my internal team. You have an authorized access to, let's say, LinkedIn as a HR recruiter. I have access to LinkedIn to look at profiles or Naukri to look at profiles. So long as I'm seeing it on the system, on the website itself, it's LinkedIn's problem. But if I download that profile from LinkedIn, then it is my problem. Even though the source may be LinkedIn, after that is my problem. So how I process that is mine.
Wouldn't the controls I put in place for, say, maintaining confidentiality, would that not be a natural extension to protection of private data?
It would be,
I
but
make it secure, I make it, I don't give everybody access, I store it properly, whatever the measures I'm taking to make it confidential, is that not a natural extension to?
it'll be easier to deal with structured data. Let's say you're dealing with payroll information, you know that it's in one place, it comes out, you can put all the controls, make sure that no one has access, it's easier to control. But if you talk about, let's say, a profile, right? Let's say as a recruiter, I download a profile and give it to my plant manager for profile. It gets distributed. The plant manager will then have to inform the security, let the person inside the factory for the interview. Right? The security may be an internal guy or an outsourced agency. Right? So that link gets extended, very difficult to penetrate. Most companies will have challenges in maintaining confidentiality of unstructured data. It's very difficult to control. Every individual will have to have that discipline. Before that discipline comes the risk of understanding, and that understanding itself gets so complex. Do I know where all PI information is sitting? Very difficult to get that repository itself. I'm telling HR as an example. Right? It could be various other stuff.
I mean, they collect 100 resumes, I recruit 2 people, but those 98 are still
98 is still there. It could be as simple as, like, say, today's brochure. It has information. That brochure may be lying elsewhere. Never know.
That's being touchy and sensitive, that means everything is being.
Everything will be. And the complexity is, let's say, GDPR applies to all European nationals, whether they are in Europe or outside. Right? Let's say someone goes from Europe to China. China regulation says Chinese regulations applies to all Chinese nationals in China and outside, and for anyone in China. So if an European goes to China, will the GDPR apply or the Chinese law apply? Right?
India coming up with
Yeah. So data privacy will be a humongous problem to deal with. And for company which have not put in process for unstructured data, it will be a nightmare. Yeah. You're almost running out of time. Yeah. Any other aspects that you would like to? Sorry, I think the system tells me to stop. Yeah. Right.
In terms of the transformation that you're talking to digital world, so are there any standards released by professional bodies like ICIA or ICMB? So that would be a guidance for many people who are, as a practicing people, they want to audit. They in-house internal audit function, they may have this guidance or technology used by technology used by the companies. For external people, they would need some guidance. Right? So are there any standards available to you or exposure database that is being released?
I'm relatively ignorant, but with that caveat, to my knowledge, there's no such guidance on that. It will be the individual acts that will apply.
Yeah, generally follow these standards against for following this audit, right? So from
Yeah.
that perspective, just
thinking whether there are any standards available.
To my knowledge, it hasn't come out, which is one of the reasons we're going to have that separate Privacy Act from a information perspective. But to guide through the transformation itself, no. I could probably check and come back, but to my knowledge,
One of the point you mentioned, like convincing the audit committee.
yeah.
So that if I have the standard prescribed by the institute, it would be easy for external auditors. I mean, external audit in the sense, company appointed finding the external firm, they can go with the regulations and convince even selection of samples. Today I go again. My opinion would be based on my sampling.
Correct.
So if my expectation is on comprehensive assessment to do the either 100% or kind of thing, that should be through some guidance, right?
See, there are guidance that talks about saying that it is good to use tools to make sure that you're analyzing all the samples and all that. It is there. Nothing that to talk about saying that you need to do this. It will always say it is suggested, it is advised, it is good to do that so that you get the best output. It will stop with that. It wouldn't go to the extent of saying or mandating anything to say, okay, this is how it should be done. So to that extent, you may not be able to showcase something to the audit committee and say that, okay, this is how it should be done. It will be more of presenting a business case and selling your story there. That's what I've seen in my experience. There's no guidance that you can fall back on.
So at least for guidance means how do we follow this kind of technologies while doing audit? How do we select the samples? If we go with this data assessment, and everything, the scoping. Maybe in the future it may come. I'm not sure that we have this standard today available.
Yeah, not available today. It talks about various sampling techniques that are there, but which one to use, it will be the auditor's discretion. It will stop with that. And similarly, what tools to use, what technology, it wouldn't specify anything. So,
Standard still uses the word judgment. So
yeah, it will give that flexibility.
sampling numbers, as you said, it's recommended, right? Based on the frequency, you can select 50, 40, whatever. But in fact, going through the standards, it doesn't even say you have to pick a sample. There's no standard. Pick a sample. Poly must do 100%. It simply says, as you said, my opinion is based on my work done. As long as my work done is supporting my opinion, then he says business case, right? I mean, I can sell my report, in that sense sell, that's it. So if I can sell my report even without picking a sample, then that's what I think. That's the
Yeah. It will just be suggestive, nothing will be prescriptive.
no standard says you must pick a sample at all. That's my
Whereas for external, we have the audit
even there are internal audit standards. ICA has the internal audit standards. IIA also has the audit standards. But even there, they only say you apply, professional skepticism.
Yeah.
And sample. So it's like a added word.
This is a technical guidance issued on digital assurance. But that is more around digital auditing, how it can be leveraged. Support primarily on the statutory.
Yeah.
Not specifically to touch upon internal audits. But
Total.
when statutory users, like how can they rely upon digital auditing tools and techniques to leverage their audit methodology?
Those governance should be put in place and are
Equally, we can apply for internal audits.
yeah, today if I'm going to bring in any change, my audit company is definitely going to ask how are you doing it. Not just for audit. If tomorrow, say as an IT company, we are leveraging on AI, right? Internally and externally as well. So the audit company has already started asking question, what is the governance mechanism around that? For what is selling to the client and what you're doing internally as well. So it will depend on how proactive your audit company is going to be as well. But it won't be prescriptive. On AI, today no one really has an answer. It's all evolving as we speak. Yeah. Yeah. To my understanding, ChatGPT 3.5 collected data and that was used by the makers to refresh the tool. ChatGPT 4 can be private. Right? Copilot Enterprise version is private. In our company, sorry, we have strict mandates that we will not be sharing any information in a public tool. So access is cut. Okay, we were able to do that, so we cut it, but generally not advisable to use a public tool.
Always pseudonymized.
Yeah. If you're experimenting something, yes, you can anonymize the data, put something, try to get your thoughts around it, but not advisable otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. If it's private, then the data doesn't leave the enterprise. No? Only then it remains private. If it's a private cloud, again, it does not go out. You can put filters, it won't go out of your cloud. That's something that we use. Private cloud, yes, we can. It doesn't go out unless you want to. Even in that case, private cloud will have an option to restrict it and an option to share it with your consent. So you can block that. Yeah.
Hi Ram. So when I have come to the session, I was expecting something in terms of mindset, right? So mindset in terms, if you draw a balance. So if I'm a sports person, right? So before I start playing a sport or before I enter do an activity, so I have a mindset, okay, I attack or defend or probably, play one of the roles. In that balance, how do you compare this activity and probably give us a
In a sports, any sport, you're playing against a competitor and there's one winner and one loser. Here, if you leave that aside, if you do not transform, you will perish. Even if it's a solo game, if you do not transform, you will perish. So to that extent, we have only one way, which is moving forward. Do or die. So we have to transform. Right? I was telling in the lunch break also. Today, if you're, let's say, in a tier 1 company doing some things, and if you're not ready to transform, you will lose your job very soon. So you can go to a tier 2 company, which is probably not in that league today. And the tier 2 company will eventually transform, which means that if you don't upskill there, then you go to tier 3. And if you've not learned in tier 1 and tier 2, unlikely that from tier 3 will transform and come back. So you'll be on a sliding scale. So it will eventually perish. Right? The good part is the transformation is not so difficult, right? Because the business is transforming. Whether we like it or not, the business wants simplistic solutions, cost effective and all that stuff. So therefore they are transforming themselves. When they're transferring on that, all we need to do is latch on to the development and then use insights, yeah? Which is not too difficult. It's just that we should be ready to embrace that change, right? And it helps us to make the business transform. We need to probably push and nudge the business to transform. Digital audit, like I said, could be on the process side as to how am I using my information of process flow or how am I using data for insight. Very often we focus on the analytics part of data, which is a key component. I don't discount that. But what do you do after that is also equally important, right? How am I reporting? How am I doing my planning? All those can also be transformed. Those are all within the auditor's domain. From an annual audit plan, risk assessment, audit universe, then individual audit planning, scoping, a lot of those areas can be digitized, right? So from a mindset perspective, the only way to do it is to look at the future. If you need to keep growing in your career, today for any career that you take, right, it is going to be for the best who can survive. There will be a very big gap between the best and the average. I'm not talking about poor performers also. There will be a gap between the best and the average. That's how the industry is going to evolve. The audit industry will evolve significantly. A lot of the routine tasks can be automated, right? That will eventually come in. So it's a question of survival. So we need to stay there and be in the game. The only way is to transform. I'm not sure the answer. Yeah. It's a one-way path. I was in, if you look at my personal experience, I was in consulting initially. I moved out of consulting for health reasons. I didn't want to run at that particular speed, at that particular point in time in my life and all this. There are a lot of variables, right? Given those variables, I said it's time for me to step out. Therefore, I stepped out. So my personal objectives are met. But does it mean that I can relax after coming to industry? It's not the case, right? When I came out of consulting, the transformation had not kicked in the industry so much, right? But today, if you look at it, it's at a very rapid pace. Not too different from consulting. Today, what is probably not there for me is only the sales or the business development aspect of it. But otherwise, all the other things are the same. It evolves so much. In today's world, it is actually easier for me to be on the consulting side because I get exposure to 20 different clients and it's easy for me to learn. But I need to be in industry and learn, which is actually more complicated than learning from a consulting space. The roles have actually reversed. But still, I just need to continue that way. And that's what keeps me going.
From a mindset perspective to answer this question, I think we all should be trained probably by storytelling. That's right. Everything boils down to that, right? Marketing people and the sales team. Why do they get all their limelight and attention? Not because they sell and all that, but they're able to convince the receiver or the stakeholders, as you say.
Yeah.
Storytelling is probably the mindset I would respond like that. You should have the ability to tell a story. You can't tell your story, you can't sell it.
Yeah.
So probably it is within our teams where we have to form this mindset. If you go to an audit committee, they are far more advanced in terms of sitting in various audit committees. Of course, you see, you get a lot of input from them. The push comes from the top management itself. Most of the companies. So probably it's somewhere down the line when we push this and make it an art culture. So that's where we can try.
True. The audit committee push will make a lot of difference. In my earlier organization, one of the places what we did is, we made sure that the audit committee deck was digital, right? It was linked with Power BI. We gave them access. They could give their comments. We could act on it, all that. After giving, they said, okay, when will I get the printout? They said, okay, we'll get the printout as well. There's some, we can't go till the audit committee, no, we will have to go digital.
We still have our board meetings digital.
Yeah. Right. Today, most in the larger companies, the audit committee decks are given digitally on secure iPads, whatever device they may have. It's given on a secure device, so they also cannot take the information. So it's done that way. But yeah, there are people who ask for printout as well. We enabled it on a mobile device. The CEO was fantastic. He loved it. So before we go for the dry run, he used to put 20 comments to different stakeholders. Response has to come. Others he will not come in for the dry run. The pre-meeting he will not come in. And he'll say, okay, you come and directly tell the audit committee. So he'll put that pressure. So that guy was extremely tech savvy. He did fantastic over there. Some people take their time to change. Some people are not required to change. Sitting in the audit committee chair, no one can force me to change. That way. But yeah, by and large, yes, people do end up changing.
With their competency, they can ask you very fundamental questions. Forget digital.
Yeah.
Tell me the double entry for this.
Fun experience there. When I was in my consulting world and we went to a client, we had big issues over there. But the audit committee and the chairman of the board was concerned about one very particular thing. TDS was not paid, so they were very concerned about that. Because for TDS delay, they can go to jail. Right? So the individual focus shifts depending on the liability that they are going to be exposed as well. Yeah. I think overshot the time as well. Yeah. Right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
In spite of his sore throat, he has taken us through a transformation, very, very important of the digital era. Actually, we have to be very, very, what he said, you transform or perish, that's all. You have to transform yourself to move ahead in the career and as well as in your organization. So, as a appreciation moment, a small gift to Mr. Ram Kumar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Raman.